Hey, what's up, guys? It's Sam OG. So I was on Facebook, and I watched a RuneSlinger video about. Hey, by the way, long time no see. It's nice to post a video again in the car on the way to work. So yeah. I was on Facebook, and I saw a video about imagination, and it's a topic that has been covered here many times, and it's a topic that RuneSlinger recently brought back a couple of times, and it's a very interesting topic. It's kind of like part of the metaphysics of role-playing games, kind of thing. It is very, very important and at the foundation of the hobby, and it's also a complicated topic just in the history of philosophy, in the history of psychology, and in art in general, because it is one of those things that we have a lot of problem trying to describe what it is. So one of the part of the discussion was about defining what it is, and I'm not going to be bogged down into definition that much, but I'm going to provide mine real quick. So RuneSlinger has a very radical approach to what imagination is. For him, imagination is a very peculiar skills or phenomena, that is not like memory, or is not like just seeing things in your head. It's a whole another kind of endeavors that is at the core of expressing oneself in the hobby of RPG, particularly as a very peculiar hobby. And so for me, and when I was listening to Brian Gregory or like some of the other guys try to describe for themselves what was RPG, not RPG, imagination, a lot of people they just bring back to imagining, like having images in their heads, and recalling stuff from memory, and all these things, right? Like which is like the basic most fundamental way of talking about imagination. So imagination, if we see it, like because you can have imagination of the past. If you have imagination of the past, what you're doing is you're just recalling stuff. You're having memories, and you can also have imagination of the future, which is like anxiety, which basically like anticipation. You're anticipating stuff, but for me it's the same thing. It's like you're using imagination to recall things, either recalling things that you've seen or recalling things that happen to you, and you're using imagination to foreshadow things and having anticipation of stuff that did not even happen yet. Now, I understand RuneSlinger's point of view, like, because when you recall things that you've seen in a movie, or you recall things that happens to you, you created nothing. You play a video game that has been created by somebody else, and you're recalling stuff from it, then you put it in your game. So I understand that. But at the same time, I mean, for me it's semantics. It's basically at least for the level of discussion, because of talking about the hobby, because we really all have our peculiar ways of going through the endeavor of imagining things. But I want to come back about on Brian Gregory's video, his answers, especially the recent one, where he's like bringing another thing. He says, imagination is part of a trilogy. It's part of creation and emotion and imagining things. And for me, I really like that way of putting it forward, because it's a very something. It's something that we go through. It's something that we feel. It's something that happens for us, not necessarily in us, and it's something that we express. And especially in the hobby of role playing games, that's exactly what we do. We share with everybody around the table the way we see things. So this is my definition of imagination, at least for the purpose of this video. But I want to talk about the habit of imagination, the habits of imagination, because for me, imagination is also a habit. And I was listening to Brian Gregory's recent experience, where he's having problem with lazy players that became too comfortable around the table, just rolling the dice. Say if I got a 15, so I hit 6 damage or something. And so there's a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of reason why this is happening to him or for his group. But in terms of imagination, just not going into the details or trying to give him too much advice, but in terms of imagination, what it seems to me is that in this particular case, which is very, very common, and happens to a lot of people, happened to my groups and happened to me as well, the group I've been playing with, it's just getting into bad habits. And this one is a bad habit of, not using, when you get tired, a lot of people, when they get tired, they stop, because it takes energy to imagine shit all the time. It takes a lot of energy, so people just stop. The brain, it gets foggy, and people roll the dice and they go after numbers. They just go after numbers, and which is kind of like, it's kind of normal. It's understandable, and we shall. But I want to share with you something that happened to me, and what I did to go against that kind of stuff that happens, because it's just boring and it's bad form for at least a good experience of the hobby, in my humble opinion and taste. So I recently gather a group together to play Burning Wheel. But not just to play Burning Wheel, but to play RPGs. These people, they never played RPG before. So I taught them how to play RPGs, and I taught them how to play Burning Wheel at the same time, kind of thing. It was like, that's the game we used. So as a teacher, and it's part of the professional habit that I have as someone who teach for a living, is the idea that, if I taught them right from the get-go, I will have a better game. Now, taughting in RPG, what is good fun and bad fun is I was supposed to make a discussion over here. It never happened, but it shall sometimes. But taught them at least the way I like. I was like, okay, so since they never played, I'm gonna taught them a lot of good habits, for them to have for me and them to have a better experience and not fall into this kind of stuff that Brian Gregory expressed in his video. So so what I did is I brought to the table a lot of protocols, and these protocols I repeat incessantly. It's kind of like a methodology. I made videos on my channel about this, like good RPG methodology. Like, this is how we go. The session starts this way. Before the dice, when the dice falls, and after the dice, what we do. And then it imposes a structure. It forces a way of behaving and being around the table, and reinforce certain habits of imagination. So for example, like one of the advice I gave all the time over here is the idea of, GM shall narrate failures on the dice, and player shall narrate successes, for example. And that way, players, and if you do that all the time, constantly, what happens is that eventually they become, it's like cattle, it's like animals, it's like they become used to it. And what they do is that they know they have to narrate. So they know they have to create something, they know they have to imagine something, and they cannot just rely on results and on the GM. And eventually it becomes a habit, and habits of imagination. Another thing that I do as a GM is, and also as a teacher, is like, why don't you tell us, what's going on? So narrate now. So what I do is I tell them all the time. It's just like, I know it's not everybody, for everyone. It's just what I do, and it helps for imagination. It's like every player is responsible for the narration of the character, and is part of the story, and the events surrounding his decision making as a character for me. And I reinforce that as a GM. Like I said, okay, so narrate what's happening. Okay, now roll this. If he fails, I narrate. If he succeeds, he narrates again. So, okay, so now tell us what you do. And I don't say tell me, I say tell us. So what happens is that everybody is kind of like responsible for everyone's imagination and everyone, representation of what's going on, and everyone is responsible for his part of the narration. And when you do that constantly from the beginning of the game to the end, every session, eventually it becomes a habit, and it creates this habit of imagination where everybody knows what they have to do, and they know when they come to the table, they know it's hard, and they know it's demanding, and they are prepared for that kind of thing. And this is the 2 cents I wanted to bring today. Is like, for me, imagination is also a habit. It's also something that if you don't do, it's not fluid, it's not warmed up, it's not of good quality. But if you do it all the time and consistently, and it becomes a responsibility, then it becomes a reflex. It becomes a second nature. It becomes part of what you have to do as the hobby. And it's surprising what it creates sometimes. Sometimes it's me as the GM who's lazy, and I'm tired, and my imagination is poor. And I come to the table, and some of these people there, they are in great shape that day, and so they feed my imagination, and then I get warmed up from them, and I get better, and then eventually I come into play. So it's kind of like a living thing, but that living thing needs water, needs the sun, needs some seeds, needs some nourishment, and if it's always relying on one person, it's gonna be weak all the time, and then it's gonna become draining for that GM person or whatever else who's doing the job. So what the only thing I wanted to share here is my for me, imagination is it's very complex thing. Like it is a phenomenon, it's an experience, it's a habit, it's also an expression of some kind of creativity. It's emotional, but it's also a shared thing. It's a shared phenomena. You have, you can have your imagination in your head, but that imagination in your head has, there's the part that you kind of like imagine, but it's also the part that has been fed by the others. And then eventually, when all these things meet together, it creates that narrative, that collective imagination. And so for that to happen, it demands work and drilling and constant, and for me, the best advice for that is never be afraid, as role players, of protocol. Break down protocols, methodology of behaving around the mechanics of the game around the table. You know, it doesn't matter if you get out of character, in character. That's the kind of stuff that I don't even get into for that kind of thing. For me, it's about, okay, so when we roll the dice, what we do before, what we do when we roll, what we do after. And me as the GM, I repeat it every dice roll. Okay, narrate before, roll, narrate after. Thank you. Now, okay, so what you're doing? Okay, and then just by pointing, tell us what you say. Okay, have this conversation together. Okay, roll that dice. Okay, then we do this. All right, so it's very about that. It's very like, and this is the teacher part in me. It's like always patiently reminding people, you need to speak, you need to describe, you need to tell. Okay, show us what your spells look like. I have a couple magic users. It's like, okay, so you know, call your spells, you know, show us what your spell look like. Okay, sometimes I don't have to say it because they bring it forward before me, but sometimes I have to, and so I always prepared. I'm like almost like a robot. It's kind of like boring maybe for some people. I know it's a thing of personality as well, but it's kind of like a discipline thing. And man, I have to do it every game. If I don't do it one game, if I don't take that responsibility on my shoulder, it's gonna be random. It's gonna be random. And I know that the less people do it, the less people fall into the habit. The habit dissolves, and then it becomes dice rolling and people looking at you with big eyes, like waiting with the mouth open, like, tell us what's gonna happen, kind of thing. So it's, you know, it's work. But anyway, so that's my 2 cents on imagination. For me, imagination is all that. It's a whole lot of thing, but it's in the perspective of Brian Gregory's situation. And also, I mean, just as a general theme, imagination is also a protocol. It's also a habit. It's a methodology. It is something that if you want in your game, you really gotta reinforce, structure, call out, and take a stand for. Otherwise it's a lot of work, and a lot of people just go around it, cut corners, kind of thing. All right, thank you for watching. If I have some more ideas, I might gonna do a part 2 for this one. All right, see you later.